one of the biggest train wrecks I think I've seen over and over again, and people end up in divorce, is they think, well, we never argue, so that's why our relationship is so great. And anytime I hear that, you guys, I'm always a little cautious, because more often than not, the reason why they never argue is because they never talk about anything significant.
And now,
I'm the captain now.
coming to you from the K2 studios in San Diego, California.
This sounds great. You sound amazing.
I always sound amazing.
It's the world famous
Everybody's hitting off like BFFs.
Chris and Christine Show.
Hey, what's happening? Thank you so much for listening, and I am Chris.
And I'm Christine, and welcome to episode 173 of the Chris and Christine Show.
Ooh, it's so great to be back in the studio, back in the captain's chair all over again, baby.
Oh, I know. You like to be the center of attention, don't you?
That's why they call me Mr. Positivity.
Nobody calls you that.
I just named it right now.
I know. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You're trying to be positive so that people think you're positive.
Well, I'm working on it, I mean, it's been a very rough week for me. How's your week been, by the way? Nothing about me, but how's your week been?
No, you can't just start like that and then defer to me. What do you mean it's been a rough week for you?
I just have this shoulder pain that's killing me. I don't know what I did, work injuries or something, but it's been a lot of long, hard days this week. And I know I only work 4. I know you're going to rub it in my face.
No,
but
I'm not downplaying it. You tell everybody what's going on.
Yeah, just that it's every day it's been very busy at work. And
because you haven't just been working 8 to 10. You've been working 12, 13-hour shifts, right?
Yes. And
plus an hour to get to work, an hour to get home. So you're...
No, it's not an hour to work. It's 30 minutes.
I mean, but you have to go get changed and everything. Hey, this is my
you're playing
empathy.
it up for me. I get it. Yeah.
This is empathy.
Oh, thank you.
You're gone 14, 15 hours plus a day.
And I don't think I've been sleeping well lately. I don't know what it is.
You haven't.
You say I've been snoring. I think.
Oh, my word. That's understatement of the year. Snore baby 101.
Yeah, well, I think it's because it's allergies. This time of year, lots of allergies, and it's just nose feels very stuffy. I just feel like I can't breathe all the time.
It's because you make us sleep with the windows open now. If you just let me close everything up and put the air back on, it would solve all of life's problems.
Hey, speaking of running air conditioning and being heat, we are now moving into fall. So I think the first day of fall was yesterday, I believe it was.
You just totally skated by my desire to have the air conditioner on. I'm telling you, it's a real solution to helping you sleep better.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe a machine. There's what's that, CPAP machine? What's the machine I'm thinking of?
CPAP?
What's the machine?
CPAP.
That's what I said. And you put on your face and it makes you breathe or something. Sounds like a not a breath. What do you call it? The oxygen machine?
Kind of.
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't know. Because I worry about you. First of all, you do not get a lot of sleep. I will very much empathize with that. Because here's your normal schedule. So you leave around 2:30. You've been getting home around 3:30 or 4 a.m. So you leave at 2:30 p.m. You're getting home at 3:30 or 4 a.m. By the time you get to bed, it's maybe 4:30, just depending on how late you got home. And then you get up by 10 or 10:15. If you're very lazy, you'll lay there for 10 or 15 minutes. But by then, Clover's having a fit because she heard your alarm.
Oh, yeah.
And she hears your alarm every morning. And the minute it goes off, she starts whining for you. So then you get up at 10:15, come down, have your slow hour or so of coffee wake up time.
I'm a very slow morning person. I'm not one person that really can just get up at the crack of dawn or the alarm goes off.
You can't get up and go.
I can't.
You literally can't.
It's not my ability. Maybe I'm just getting older. I think the older they get, the less I can do that.
No, I think it's because when I finish telling everybody your schedule, it'll make a lot more sense. So you get up at 10:15, you come down, we have coffee together because I normally try to take a little bit of a morning break if I'm home. But you spend an hour and 15 minutes slowly waking up. So by then we're talking 11:15, 11:30. And for context purposes, everybody, by 2:30, he has to be out the door and it starts all over again. So from like 11:30 to 2:30, you have to do, anything personal that you need to take care of, paying the bills, getting back to people, anything podcast related, podcast editing, running any errands, going to get the oil changed in the car, that kind of stuff. And then, not to mention, going to get showered and getting ready and all of that kind of stuff. And so, when you really do look at it, once we start your work week on Tuesdays until Saturday mornings, it's like just you get into like machine mode where you just like eat, sleep, work, eat, sleep, work. That's why I think when we were dating, it was easier to not have me around, maybe because you didn't have to worry about, like, first of all, we just didn't see each other typically like Tuesday through Friday when we were dating. It was just understood, like it was just too busy. Like I was working, we had opposite schedules. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that when you finally moved in and we got married and had the house and the COVID happened where you were working from home more often, it was able to see you more often. I really do appreciate our coffee dates and coffee time.
Right.
We never had that before. Before it was like, the weekends or maybe a lunch date occasionally.
I would say like that was the thing, like COVID, although it was, it's been hard that everybody went through it and it changed so much of our world. The one silver lining is that it actually did give us an opportunity to be around each other more that we would not have had, because we would have gotten married and I would have gone right back to work and in the office 5 days a week, and your regular schedule. And, I don't know how our relationship would be different. I wonder if we wouldn't bicker as much if I wasn't home as much, like if we didn't see each other as much.
Oh yeah. Wasn't the thing you always said that like distance makes the heart grow fonder?
I think so.
Yeah.
But I think it also leaves room for like miscommunications and feeling like disconnected from each other if you don't see each other as much. So, I mean, there's a benefit and a drawback. Like I'm back in the office 2 days a week, and my first day of the week is Mondays, which you're home, which I think may actually be a little bit nice for you because it gives you a little bit of quiet at home. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I am trying to figure the whole thing out, and I always think about like if you wanted to, I could go to day shift on the same schedule. I could.
No.
Meaning that I had to be there super early, but I would be home at night. The only benefit, I'd be home at night. But then I know a lot of people do that. They will work day shifts so they can be kind of at home at night because you got to bed so early. So
I don't know though, because
like
I like my
really.
nights. I like my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings where I can focus on the business.
Oh, totally.
And compartmentalize and not have to feel like you're being neglected because I'm working for hours at a time. I feel like I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know what it is in me. When you're gone at work, even though I've worked an entire work day in my regular job, I feel this like guilt that you're working and I'm not. So if I'm like if I'm like sitting and watching Netflix, I'll like make myself get my computer out and do work, almost like I'm punishing myself.
It's funny you say that because I feel the exact same way when you're at work. So on Mondays, when you're at work and I'm home, I'm like running around. I want to do a bunch of stuff, like go get the kids, podcast stuff, work on this, work on that. Like I feel like I should be on the clock and not just like sitting around. I got to tell you something. The other day was the first time in a really long time that I actually had some free time before I had to go to work where I sat down, actually watched some Netflix. I haven't done that in years.
But why is that? Why is it that we feel the need to like be busy while the other one is working? It's almost as if we're not giving ourselves permission for self-care. That's not a really healthy cycle to be in.
Well, I think, I don't know. I maybe it's because we feel like, it's like when you have people over your house and you're like always trying to be like busy, like cleaning and doing something to make yourself look busy instead of just standing around and sitting around doing nothing. We have company over. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, maybe for you, but not really for me. But
I always
yes.
kind of feel like that too. If I have company over, I'm like picking stuff up and I'm kind of like walking around the place and kind of making sure everything's cool. But I'm not, I feel like I'm in the, like when you do the flower weddings, the wedding stuff, you're like in the coordinator mode versus the guest mode.
Okay.
And that's the kind of mode I feel like when people are here at the house, are entertaining and things like that. Even though it's my house and I want to just like relax in it and enjoy a weekend or whatever.
Right.
But I feel like I'm part of the staff and I have to like make everything's going and the guests are well taken care of. But
yeah, I feel like maybe we need to give each other permission to just be lazy when we're not like when I'm at work and you're not, to like tell you, hey, you can just do whatever. Like,
I like that.
Don't feel that you have to, do X, Y, and Z. If there's things that need to be done around the house, we typically talk through them. And I'm like, oh, hey, while I'm gone, do you mind doing these 1, 2, and 3 things? But I also try not to give you a list of to-dos to do while I'm at work, because I don't want you to do it to me.
Oh, really? I would never do that to you. I don't think. I always say, hey, listen, if you have time.
Yeah, that's your way of telling me you need me to do something.
If you got, hey, listen, if that's so much trouble, if you could, I mean, you don't have to. But
ladies, if your man says that to you, that's his way of being
I'm just saying, listen, I would do it for you.
That's see, that's the guilt part. I would do it for you.
If I had no legs and I was blindfolded, I would do it for you in a heartbeat, honey. But I'm just saying, if you had no so much trouble, could you please run by the store and pick me up? Whatever. Exactly.
Like, go way out of my way. Last night, you were you do this notoriously. It's like at the worst times too. Last night, it's 11:30 p.m. and I'm like winding down, like super tired, getting very sleepy. And maybe it was 10 p.m., but you were like standing at the freezer, like getting yourself some ice cream. And you're like, oh, hey, can you please sew up my shorts for me right now? I'm like, Chris, are you kidding me?
I didn't say right now. I said sometimes.
Oh, no. You said, can you sew up my shorts right now?
I didn't say the words right now.
Oh, yeah, you did.
I would never do that.
Yes, you did. 100%.
I wouldn't say right now is very second, especially at that late night.
Oh, yes, you did. And I said, well, not right now, Chris. Like, we're just like relaxing. I don't have my sewing stuff out. And you're like, fine, whatever.
I said, fine. Well, I'll take it to the sweatshop down the street. And they can sew it. Or whatever.
This is what I deal with, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my world. And this is the reason why I don't feel that I have permission to rest while you are at work. I literally do stay up until like 1 a.m. every morning. I don't know. I feel bad.
That I'm up that late?
Yes. I feel like you should suffer
It's weird
together.
that you say that, because I feel the same way too. When you work weddings and I'm home, the nights you're doing wedding stuff, I try to stay up for you too.
You do.
And sometimes I don't make it, but I do try to stay up for you, and
you never make it.
Because I'm old. But
and then I'll get home. I'll be like driving home and be like, honey, I'm so tired. Can you help me unload the car when I get home? And you're like, tonight? Really?
Boxes and boxes of stuff.
You're like, what?
It's like asking someone to move.
Like, what is it that you need my help with? And I'm like, thanks. Thank you so much for being so attentive.
Well, I am working on it and being.
You are working on it.
I'm working on being very helpful and stuff, and it's weird because for many years I've operated as a solo lonely guy. Lone wolf, as it will. Bachelor Pad City.
No, you haven't.
And so for many years of my life, which means BK, before Christine, of course.
Oh my God. Okay.
And I, for the first time ever, have somebody to take care of and someone that I can count on and work together with as a team.
Okay.
And I'm not used to that,
Okay.
See?
Stop the story. Rewind. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris does this all the time. When he wants to evoke the violins, the pity on me, he goes into, I was a bachelor for many, many years. When I do the timeline of Chris's relationship history, there's a blip of like maybe 2-week period of time, except for right before we started dating. You were like perpetual relationship guy for like 7 years.
Hey, what can I say? The ladies love me. I don't know.
I know. So, Mr. I was single for many, many years.
Well, still, even if you're in a relationship with somebody, you're still single. You're still like married.
What?
You're not married.
Even if you were in a Did I just hear that? Even if you're in a relationship with someone, you're still single? What?
I think you're like married. You're not married. You're not like living together. You're like, dating or whatever.
You're still not a bachelor.
Well, okay.
Don't dig yourself out of this hole. Just admit it.
Well, I did buy my house by myself. The other house.
You did.
That's right. Single guy.
You were in a relationship with somebody.
When I bought the house, no, I wasn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was the 2 weeks that you were off again.
Yes. No, that was during the escrow.
The on again, off again relationship you had. Oh, anyways, this is fun today. I'm having fun joking around with you. And, it has been a while that we have, a couple of weeks since we've been able to podcast because we have had a lot of stuff happening in our life. So, if you're just catching up, maybe you haven't listened to a couple of episodes and you just got right back in the swing of things. We have been we've been prioritizing our family and our relationship, which means that we don't always podcast on a weekly basis. However, we're still packing in some great content for you all, right, Chris?
Absolutely tastic, baby.
And speaking of packing in great content, this week we have another fantastic guest. He's going to be talking with us about his own journey through grief, and we're going to be back with him right after this.
Enjoy listening to podcasts and ever wonder, can I make a podcast? But it seems so complicated, and good audio production can take time. What if there was a way to create an amazing podcast easily? Well, now there is. Introducing Podcasting Made Easy from Podtastic Audio. My production team will handle your entire audio production, allowing you to be the star of your show. This is Podcasting Made Easy. How easy? Well, so easy, you don't even have to press record. Now that's easy. Your listeners are waiting. Let's deliver. Sign up for a free strategy call today at podcasticaudio.com/easy.
And welcome back, everybody. Today we have another fantastic VIP guest. He is an author and a speaker. We're really excited to have him on the show. Welcome to the show, Clint Hatton.
I love that. That is quite the introduction. And I tell you what, I need that recording so that I can cheer myself on every now and then.
Hey, Clint. Well, we bring him in here just for you. If we're stopping by. Thank you for showing up today, man. We appreciate this.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this. I've listened to you guys, and I know we're going to have some fun and talk about some great stuff.
Absolutely. Now, Clint, where in the world are you joining us from today?
I am joining you guys from McKinney, Texas. So if you're not familiar with where that is, we're a suburb of Dallas. And today it's actually, we had a cold front come in. So it's freezing today. It's about 95.
Well, you guys get your jackets on and get your hoodies on.
Oh, totally.
You guys chopping firewood in the backyard and putting the fireplace on.
It's really rough, man. No, we seriously, I don't know how much, I know you guys are in San Diego, so I'm fairly jealous of that right this minute. But this summer has been brutally hot.
You and Arizona, I heard.
Yeah. I actually have a lot of friends out in that area. And it's just been smoking hot. So no joke, today it's only mid-90s and it actually feels cool, which is a weird sensation.
Well, down here, we live in the East County of San Diego County, and it gets pretty hot, but definitely not Texas hot. But we do have, it's more like a mountain heat. So it's like direct sun, super hot, no humidity. And we've been just under the triple digit mark for the last couple of days, but nowhere like what you all have been experiencing.
Right. And I don't know if you guys would even know this because I don't think I put in any of my information, but I'm actually from California. I was born and raised in what's now called Santa Clarita.
Oh, Magic Mountain.
That was my first summer job at 16. That's exactly right. Totally.
What was your job at Magic Mountain?
The games area. Yeah, I was the guy trying to get you to keep throwing me $1 bills for that ring. You're never going to get around that box with the big handle attached to it. Yeah.
Do you ever throw it over there and make it look super easy for the sucker kid who goes there and drops his whole allowance? You're like, look at me.
You want the inside track in there? Yes. I'll tell you the real scoop about that. There really was, for a lot of different games, a trick. And by that, I don't mean deceptive. I mean, if you knew exactly where to put something or throw something, it would work every time. But the funniest was, the I don't even know what they call it. I can't remember today, but the big hammer, and you hit the big pad, and then the metal thing goes up and you're trying to ring the bell. I don't even remember what we called it.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to require strength, right? And it was so funny, man. I would have guys that would show up that outweighed me by 100 pounds, and they just couldn't ring it. And, we did it every day. I probably weighed 140 pounds. I could ring it with one hand.
No way.
And it would drive. Yeah. Cause there was a specific spot that if you consistently hit it, it was going to ring every time, because it was all about leverage. It really wasn't that much about power, but people think it is. So it was so funny. I'd have guys throwing down 20, 40, 60 bucks trying to ring that bell because they've got their girlfriend with them, and I could do it with one hand, and I could do it with one hand. And it was a lot of fun.
Oh, man.
Now, I've always wondered, and this is something that Chris has told me, the basketball hoop game.
Yes.
He says that it's not really round, that it's slightly like an oval. I'm not quite
He's
sure.
probably right. This has been a long minute, man. I was 16, so it's been a while. I don't know, but you know what? I would not be surprised if that were the case. We weren't trained that or showed that, but you might be right, Chris.
Well, the one at the San Diego County Fair we go to every year, they got the full on fair section with all those carnival things and stuff like that. Instead of using this year, instead of using actual cash, they had this credit card, debit card system they have where you load credits on a card, and each one of those vendors, they had a little handheld device where it kept track of your credits and all that kind of stuff. So I had the credits on a card for the kids to use, and they burned through those so quickly because each of those vendors was 5 or 6 credits, and you only had 50 credits or whatever. So do the math. It's 4 tries and you're done. But yeah, that's where they have the basketball hoops that are from looking straight on it, it looks like a normal basketball hoop. Oh, I can make that shot, no problem. But as you walk around the side of it, is when you notice that the actual hoop itself is squished to an oval shape. And then the balls themselves are overly inflated.
Yeah, for sure on that. Well, I'd like to think that Six Flags was on the up and up a little bit more than maybe a shady sideshow, but who knows?
Definitely.
Yeah, well, our kids love to definitely drop all of their money in that area, and we try and steer them around. I am a personal fan of the squirt gun games, the ones where you have to squirt it into a hole, but you have to have a minimum of 4 players. And so the way we rig it is we're a family of 5. And so if it's minimum of 3 players, we'll wait. We'll outweight anybody else that's standing there, and we'll go just the 3 of us. So we're guaranteed that somebody's going to win. And
it's genius.
It is. Thank you. Because it's normally one of the kids really wants one of the prizes. And so it's a team approach to it. We're okay, we're all going to do this, but we're doing this for the purpose of winning the prize for, whatever kid it is. And then it never fails that at the very last second, right when they're okay, we're getting started, somebody will slide right in.
Yeah, right.
And we all 3 will look at them you didn't just do that.
And it's usually the ringer, right? The one who's done this thing 100 times right.
Totally. Although I will say, so I took our oldest after he just graduated from high school in June, and he and I went to Vegas, and we went to Circus. And I was playing one of those games by myself, and it was it wasn't the squirt gun one, but it was one where you only needed 1 player, and you had to roll and knock down milk cartons or something like that, random.
Yeah.
And I just did it, and the worker wasn't even paying attention, and I was I think I just won the top prize. And she looked and she was oh my gosh, you did. And I walked out with a longboard skateboard for my kid.
Oh,
and he
wow.
was
that's nice.
He was dude, Mom, how much did that cost? And I was $3. So,
is that where that thing came from? I see it in the garage. I didn't know where it came from.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's a nice prize.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever had anything that was probably valued over about $350.
Right. Yes.
Even the biggest stuffed animals weren't exactly worth much.
Yeah, they definitely weren't the kind that you'd get at Build-A-Bear.
No.
So, Clint, what made you leave beautiful California and go out to Texas?
Oh, geez. Yeah, that requires a wider glance at my story. So I grew up in Santa Clarita, but then when I was about 19, I'd recovered from a major knee surgery and decided I wanted to pursue junior college football and try and get a full ride to a bigger school. So I actually moved to Redding, California, which you guys may be familiar of.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, way up north. And so I was up there, and short version is my second year up there, I ended up blowing out my knee again. And
Oh man.
next thing you know, I got into the car business and started working. And 14 years later, I was still in Redding. But ultimately, what happened for me was I ended up in a divorce. That's part of the story too. I got married, and we made it about 5 years, and total train wreck. Neither one of us were. Well, I'll just stick with me. I was not a healthy person. I had a lot of baggage, a lot of skeletons in my closet, and certainly was not the husband that I should have been. And
Were you younger when you got married, you think?
No.
Because usually,
thank you for trying, Chris. Thank you for trying to give me an out. Yeah.
Well, I'm saying usually when you are younger, like I noticed with the younger marriages, like get married right out of high school, like you don't know nothing, but you think you know everything, but you don't know nothing about life. And then life really throws a wrench at you. And then,
I don't know. I think divorce doesn't discriminate. I think if you go in and you have hurts, habits, and hangups that you haven't really dealt with, that no matter your age, it's going to be toxic to the relationship. So, but go on,
that's
Clint.
True.
You were saying that you came in with stuff.
Yeah, no, that's totally true because, during that season, after I'd blown out my knee and got into the car business, I had abused drug and alcohol, going back to when I was probably 13 years old. Sports was really the only reason why I didn't go completely off the deep end. So it wasn't like abusing drugs and alcohol was a new thing. But by the time I got in the car business in my early 20s, that's where I was actually introduced to meth.
Oh, wow.
And so I ended up, almost 9 years, not every day. I wasn't the type of person that you necessarily think of when you think of somebody that does meth a lot. But it's funny because there's a lot of people that are professionals that are addicted to meth. They're just not the picture boy, of that particular addiction. So, that was during my meth years and all that. And, she partied too. And we both had a lot of hurts and things in the past. So, I think we're mid-20s when we got married. We weren't, old, but we weren't young either. And ultimately it was a complete disaster. But what ended up happening was I was not a religious person. I'd been to church a couple of times when I was a kid, but that was about it. I wasn't raised in church or anything like that. And I had some friends that invited me to a church in Redding that they really loved. And I decided finally one time to give in. And I really had a really powerful experience that day. And that's when, for me, I decided to become a person of faith. I gave my life to God and started to turn my life around. Well, my now ex-wife, of course, wasn't a big fan of that. She wasn't too thrilled with that. I felt like pretty early on that I was being called into ministry, to being in full-time ministry of some kind. And it just wasn't really a lifestyle that she was looking for. So we actually made it about 9 months. And then she finally delivered papers to me on December 23rd. I'll never forget. It was 2 days before Christmas. And we had a crazy guys. I mean, we fought like you can't imagine. I mean, ugly fights.
Right.
And it was really interesting. The day she presented the papers to me, it actually came on the heels of a vacation that we'd went on with a group of friends that was probably our best week in 5 years, So the timing was a little odd. And I remember getting so mad in my head. I was just getting so angry. And then I really felt like, and for me, I did feel like it was God speaking to me, but it wasn't like this audible thing or anything like that. I just sensed this, why are you so angry? And we ended up sitting and talking for probably 2-3 hours straight, totally calm, being really vulnerable with just how we felt about our relationship, where we both wanted to go with our lives. And we ended up just coming to this amicable decision that, you know what? It's just not working for us. And so we didn't even hire a lawyer. We hired a paralegal, divided the house, did everything we needed to do. It was actually pretty simple and pretty easy considering the volatility of, what had been our marriage. And then we both moved on. And so ultimately, and that's going to lead us back to why we went on this little rabbit trail here. Ultimately, after that experience, I knew I was now as Southwest Airlines like to say, free to move about the country. And I wanted to change, I really wanted to change. And so I had prayed about a few different places. I had friends in LA still. I had friends in the Bay Area and, thought about moving there. But there was just something about Dallas. I'd never even been here before. I didn't have a job, nothing awaiting me. And ultimately, that's where I felt like I was supposed to go. And that's ultimately what led me to Dallas.
Was it kind of like you were just looking at places on the map and you just felt like Dallas was a good fit of all the places? I mean, no, Dallas in general, it's a fairly large city. I'm sure there's opportunity for almost anything you wanted to do. You probably could find it there. I would think rent is probably cheaper there than say LA. So, it's probably a safe bet, weather's, other than being 150 degrees, weather's probably okay, so it's probably a fair place to really start a new life, I would think.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great question because, there are people that do that, right? They'll get out a map and I'm done and just throw a dart and okay, but, Sioux City, Iowa, that's where I'm moving, whatever.
Yeah.
And but for me, it wasn't quite like that. There was a couple of friends that I had, including the ones that had invited me to actually come to church when that happened, that were involved. We were all involved in a network marketing company at the time, a nutritional company. And they had Dallas on the map because they really felt like it was very centrally located to help blow that business up.
Oh, that makes sense.
And so so that's actually how Dallas as a city came onto the radar. And the funny thing about that is ultimately when I moved here, it didn't take me long at all. And I really wanted nothing to do with the business anymore. So they actually did come here and they did the business for about 2 years. And then they all actually live in Northern California again. They all moved back. But I ended up staying and ultimately that's when I got into ministry and ultimately becoming a pastor. And also how I ended up meeting my current bride, which we've been married a little over 20 years.
Well, it's interesting the circumstances that God uses in our life to be able to move us out of our comfort zone. And Chris and I've talked about this a lot is after my first marriage ended and I needed to get a fresh start. It was like, where in the state of California could I move that was the furthest possible place away from what my current location was without actually crossing state lines? And so, no matter what it is that leads you to a specific place, it's what happens once you get there. And especially after divorce, that can be a really dark time when you thought that your life was going to look and feel a certain way. And now you're staring in the mirror and you're like, okay, here's my new reality. So many people like to, you watch Hallmark Channel or whatever, and you see, the person goes through their, 2 days of sitting on the couch and eating ice cream and then brushes themselves off of the crumbs. And now they have this genius idea of this multi-million-dollar company and their life turns around in like 2 days.
And don't forget they met the dream guy at the cute meat at the coffee shop.
But that happens as, because they're always like the patent lawyer or something like that. But for your journey, I know you gave us like the Reader's Digest version. So you find yourself in Dallas. You have this newly found faith, which sounds like it gave you a lot of hope. You feel this calling to go into ministry, but still you're now, at whatever certain age you're at, single, starting over with a few friends around you. What was that phase of life like for you?
Yeah, well, that's a great observation, what you just said. And obviously you've had the personal experience, so you can really relate to it. When I came here, I really did, even though I had the hope, because what you just described is very accurate. I had a lot of hope. I was very excited about being here on many levels, but that doesn't overcome immediately, the pain and even the shame over a divorce. My parents ultimately ended up married over 65 years.
Wow.
And so, at that stage of my life, they had been married, 40 of it. So divorce wasn't something that I had experienced within my own family. Now, of course, I had friends that went through that, but it was just something that I never imagined. Nobody does. Nobody gets married thinking, okay, I'm so excited about this. I do. And let's see, when are we going to get divorced? I mean, nobody does that, right?
Well, it's like you go to a job interview, you get hired the first day, you think, when am I going to get fired?
Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think for me, I definitely was dealing with some of the shame and just disappointment that it didn't work out. And so what happened for me was for about the first 2 years, I really felt strongly like God was telling me I was going to get another chance. And I didn't mention we did not have children. So that was not a part of this equation. And I wanted to be a dad someday. I wanted to be married again. And so I really felt like that opportunity was going to come. But I also at that point, recognized that I was not in any position, to be the kind of husband that I wanted to be. And so I started reading books. I would even go to, sometimes church would do a workshop for married people. And I'd listen in, right? Even though I was single, because I knew, oh, so what? Yeah, I've been married. So what? That experience didn't teach me how to do it right. So I know nothing. And I like to say I became a student of, what I thought it would look like to be a really healthy, good husband in a healthy relationship and ultimately a good dad as well. So I spent 2 years doing that, didn't date, um, really even for a lot of that, I was friendly. I would, talk to people and occasionally go out to lunch or dinner with a group of people, but I spent a lot of time on my own during those 2 years. And then by the time, I met who ended up becoming my bride, and that's a whole other story, guys. And I'm just warning you in advance. Let's not talk about that one too much unless you want to do part two, because it in and of itself is a very involved story. And I've done full podcasts just on our story. But, ultimately I ended up meeting my current bride and we set out on a new journey. And by then, I felt confident that I was in a good place. I was healthy. My thought life was healthy and those things.
Well, so you said something, Clint, that it's just very much piqued my curiosity. Let me give a little bit of backstory. So a little bit of my backstory is I am a wedding planner. And so I work with a lot of couples at various stages of life and experiences. And my observation is there's so much preparation that goes into the ceremony and the party and the reception. And even I notice on the bride's part, there's a significant amount of like preparing herself to be a wife. And what I don't observe, and it's just because I mostly work with the ladies as they're, the leads typically in the planning. I don't always see the men doing the work, quote unquote, of like becoming, again, air quotes, husband material. And so when you were saying you were spending time trying to, figure out what kind of husband you wanted to be, what kind of partner, for guys that are listening right now, maybe they're married or maybe they're, single and looking to be in, a married kind of situation, what did that actually look like? Because I think some guys just think, well, I need to be financially stable as protector provider. Like I need to have a good job. I need to be able to put a roof over her head. But like on a deeper level, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, what kind of steps should a guy be going through to get themselves to a place to actually help lead a household?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the way I would have to try and answer that question is, I was 33-ish, I think, when 33, when we got married when I got married the second time. My wife had never been married, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also 11 years older, or younger. I'm sorry. I'll throw that in there too. The process that I went through was very self-guided. But I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that, I was a little bit older, I was mature, and then I had such a bad experience. And again, more than anything, wanted to be a different person than who I was before. That what I did was very self-guided. So I did. I read a lot of books. I would talk to people. If I saw a couple, for example, at church or wherever, maybe it was at work or whatever, that appeared to have a really great relationship, I would ask questions, so I would not really interviews, probably too strong of a term, but I would talk to people, that look like anything. We talk about that when you talk about building a business or anything else, find someone that's successful and find out what they do. And that's what I did. And so I want to reiterate what you said, though, because what you said is so dead on. Most people go into a marriage and most of their focus in those early days leading into the day they say I do is on the event, the ceremony, just like you said. And then you can splash in the honeymoon, right? If they can afford to go somewhere.
The best part of the getting married.
Yeah.
I mean, ask me,
well,
man.
The guy's thinking that. We all know why, right?
Yes.
He's ready to go. And especially if they're, coming from a religious standpoint where maybe, they did not have premarital sex, they're ready to go. That's just the blunt truth. They're ready to go perform their marital duties, right? In the name of God, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. So those are the things they're focused on. And it can be a really porous foundation. One of the things that I've done for years, my wife and I have done, is we were involved in marriage ministry or marriage coaching for almost 20 years. And one of the things that we did during those days where we would put together teams and, put together curriculum and stuff like that, is we tried to help the couple focus. And typically it would take about anywhere between 12 to 18 weeks to go through one of our courses. And the premise of it is that you're not preparing for an event. You're preparing for a marriage. And so what that meant is we would have them fill out different types of questionnaires and questions about their family, their upbringing, what were their expectations with who was going to have certain roles, like just even granular down to, okay, who's going to take out the trash, who's going to iron the shirt, all those things. And with sex, how often do you think you should have sex? How often do you want to have sex? All those things, because they typically would not even talk about those things.
Right.
And they think just because they get along that's enough of the secret sauce. And they just don't know, they're not experienced and it's romantic and you should enjoy all those things. That's all good. But at the end of the day, the marriage is work. Marriage is a major commitment and it's work. And, I am very blessed. We have an amazing marriage. It's better today than it was 20 years ago, but that didn't happen by accident and it didn't happen by osmosis. It happened because we have a lot of tough conversations. We talk about things that sometimes we don't want to talk about. And we deal with things head on. And those are all things that if you don't have some form of a basis of that before you say, I do, then it's going to be tough. It doesn't mean you can't make it. It doesn't mean you won't have a great marriage, but you're going to struggle more than you need to.
Yeah, that's, such important truth right there. And, like I was saying, I observe it all the time where people get caught up in the Disneyland effect is what I like to refer to it as, because meeting your person and getting swept up in the romance can feel magical and, dopamine gets dropped into your brain and you're, so lovey-dovey and, then all of that wears off. And when you hit your first bump in the road, it's like you look around and it's oh, wait, did I make the wrong decision? And then you hit something that's more than a bump in the road and it's catastrophic. And you realize either you have a good foundation or it starts to crumble. And so when we look at your story, fast forward, skip over the meeting your wife part, you have this work that you've been doing on yourself. You find a life partner and it's the right fit and you're equally matched. And you're married and you have your first kids and you're going along, and then tragedy hits with your little one when they're born, with your wife not doing so well.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So what was that like?
Well, I think to your point, I'll say first that just foundationally, the fact that we had really worked on our communication, even before we got engaged, I should point out, because we were engaged for 9 months once we did get engaged. Prior to that, we were friends for, probably a year and a half. And so we practiced communication. And then once we got engaged, we practiced communication. By that what I mean is, having conversations about all kinds of things. One of the biggest train wrecks I think I've seen over and over again, and people end up in divorce, is they think, well, we never argue, so that's why our relationship is so great. And anytime I hear that, you guys, I'm always a little cautious, because more often than not, the reason why they never argue is because they never talk about anything significant.
Right.
And
That makes sense.
That's exactly right. And then when something big does hit, to your point, Christine, they don't even know what to do, and they just implode. So to your point, we had that foundation, which would ultimately end up being incredibly critical for. And again, our story, there's some complications to it, and I'm trying to keep us on task here. By the time we got engaged, there was a period of time where we were not on the friendly side of things, not enemies, but we weren't dating. We weren't really talking. And that had to do with the fact that my wife had actually went on a trip, on a vacation, had a little fling in another country and ended up pregnant.
Oh, wow.
So my oldest son, Gabriel, who I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, was not my biological son, but from the moment we got engaged, he was only he was 16 months when we got married. So he was 6 months old, something like that, give or take, when we got engaged. So I became dad pretty quickly, but that's how we began. And so when I got married to Amárillys, I became a husband and a father instantly all at once,
Right.
And so all those things were mixed in, but we had this foundation of having worked through some things, including this pregnancy, which again, I know that's a tempting topic, but it's a pretty layered story.
Right.
But ultimately we worked through all that and came to the conclusion that we were the right partner for one another. And that, especially once Gabriel was born, that I was the right dad for him as well. Because for her, rightfully so, even if I seemed right for her, but I didn't seem fit to be a dad, that's a deal killer, right? And so, so we knew by the time we got engaged that this was right. This is where we need to go. And I was excited to be a father. And so that was our first big hurdle. And then, a couple of years went by and we decided that we wanted to have, a child together. And that's when we had a miscarriage, which my heart goes out to our listeners right now, because there's so many that have suffered that kind of a loss, and in some cases, more than once. And so it's really hard. It's a difficult thing. And so we'd been through some things, we'd talked through some things. And so we made it through that. I was going to say fairly easily. I don't mean the emotions of losing the child. I mean, just being together and helping each other, grieve that situation. And then we were given advice by a doctor that we should wait at least 6 months before we tried again. And that had to do with, we lost the baby in the 12th week, and they had some ideas of what they thought might have went wrong. So their advice was wait 6 months. And we talked and we prayed about it. We felt like, no, that's not for us. We're just gonna, we didn't rehire the goalie, right? we just didn't get back on birth control, and decided we would just see what happened. And we ended up pregnant less than 30 days later.
Wow.
And of course, that was a little scary. I'm being very candid. That was a little scary when we started creeping up on that 12-week, 13-week spot. Your human nature, even if you're full of faith and hope, it's still going to get challenged. Like, oh gosh, could this happen again? And of course, this time it didn't. And we went full term with our middle son, Joel. But that's when we thought, all right, we made it. We're good now, and she's not, because she had a pregnancy disease. I'm sorry, I need to point that out. When she had our oldest, Gabriel, she had a pregnancy disease called preeclampsia. And so he was
super serious.
Yeah. So he was born 7 weeks early at 3 pounds, 12 ounces. So he was a preemie. So when we had Joel, we got through, the scary stage of, okay, we didn't have a miscarriage. Thank God for that. And we got all the way there, and we get to the hospital, and she got stuck. And she's better at the numbers than I can't remember if it was 2 centimeters or what, but she had started going to labor and just got stuck and tried for like 12 hours.
Oh, wow.
And nothing was moving. And so ultimately they just said, listen, you probably just need to go ahead and do a C-section because you're getting stressed. The baby's getting stressed. And so we agreed. So, okay, fine and dandy. But then they went to do the epidural and it wouldn't take.
Oh my goodness.
She could, they were like, okay, we're getting ready to roll you in. Can you feel this? And she's like, yes, I can feel that. And so ultimately they were able to work around it and finally get the anesthesia to work. Had Joel all excited. I go into the room with the nurse, the whole, movie scene, they're cleaning him up and handing him to me. And, I'm like, can't be any more excited. And then all of a sudden a nurse came into the room where I was with Joel and the other nurse and said, we need your help. And they rushed me off to the waiting room that Amárillys was in. And she was really struggling to come out of the anesthesia. So, that went on for a few hours and we had some very scary moments. They basically had me with her just to keep talking to her and keep her occupied and not let her go to sleep. And, people are more likely to do that with someone they actually know as opposed to their doctor. So that's why they pulled me into it. And so, very scary situation again. And so ultimately after that, we were done, guys. We were done. That's it. Time out. No more babies. It's over. And
in that moment, Clint, because you've talked about a couple of challenging situations and, talking about your journey, not necessarily your wife's, but you've gone through this previous divorce. You've relocated. You're starting your life over. You've met your person. You went through some challenges in dating. You get married and your husband and dad, and now you're going through this, on the verge of potentially losing your wife. That's what it feels like in that moment. Yeah. And you've talked about being a man of faith. Did you at any point in time stop and be like, all right, God, like, I promised to follow you, and I didn't think that all this was going to be in my path. Like, maybe it's easier if I just don't. Like, would my life be better if I just don't follow this path of faith? Like, did you have a crisis of faith at any point in time in this journey?
That's a really fair question. And I think a very honest question. And up to that point, no. But I'll tell you partly why. The situation with Joel, that all happened so fast. I mean, we were just in the room, right, thinking she was going to give normal birth. And then one thing led to another. And it was just a train that left the station, So I really feel like at that time, I didn't have time to think that way. We just did what the doctors were, or I did what the doctors were telling me to do. And of course, I was praying to myself, over the situation. But I didn't really feel that way at that point in time. Now, I half joked a second ago that we were done, and we were done for 5 years until one day I saw her picking up other babies, which that wasn't unusual, but she was holding on to them just a little bit longer than I was comfortable with. Right? Because you could
did you
just
guys
see
go
it.
to the baby zoo or the baby petting zoo or something? Where do you find all these babies
Church
laying around?
nursery, aka
that's the thing. We have been a part of fairly large churches, and there's a lot of babies.
Right.
There's a lot of babies.
I don't see so many babies that often in my line of work, but
yeah, no, totally. That's why. Yeah, absolutely. And so ultimately, clearly we made the decision to try again. And at that point, you guys, we had 2 boys. So we're like, hey, we'll try for the girl. Now, I still don't know what that looks like or what that means, right? Because, we pretty much went about things the way we did the first 2 times. But ultimately, we're just like, it'd be fun to have a girl. And no, it didn't happen. But what happened that was really crazy was we were 3 months into it. I apologize, 6 months. 6 months into the pregnancy. And up to this point, things had gone pretty well. And we were feeling really good about it. And we literally had lived in Washington State. By now, we're actually on staff at a church up in the Seattle, Washington area with some mentors of ours. And we hadn't moved yet from Louisiana, which is where we had been living. We had a home down there still. So I actually jumped on a plane one morning and everything seemed fine. And my purpose was to fly down to Louisiana and meet movers because we'd finally given up. This was during the housing crisis,
Mm-hmm.
07, 08,
Oh,
this whole
fun
deal.
times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Our stories tend to involve multiple layers. So that was going on, and we just couldn't sell the house. Nothing in Southeast Louisiana was selling. So I was going down there with the purpose of being there for 3 days, meeting with the movers, getting everything packed up. Then I would fly back. And then ultimately, when the movers showed up, we were going to move into our own place because at that point we'd been renting a friend's home that just wasn't in it. And so I get on the plane, get all the way down there. You got to stop in Dallas on your way. So there's no direct flight. So by the time I get to Louisiana, it's about 8 hours later. I call her. I'm leaving the airport. I'm in my rental car. And she said, things have really gone bad.
Oh, wow.
And to fast forward, her preeclampsia ultimately is a pregnancy disease that involves high blood pressure.
Right.
Well, there's an escalation of that called HELP syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's when it goes to a whole other level. Well, we didn't know it yet at that part of the phone call, but that's what was happening. So she was already being driven to the first hospital where our doctor was that we had planned on giving delivery with, and with a blood pressure that was 200 over 100 something, right? And I'm like, oh my God, you can't be serious. And so she's got to get to the hospital. I'm like, okay, I'm not even to the house yet. I got to go to, it's just reality. I got to go to Walmart to pick up some supplies, and I'm going to go to the house and I'll call you. Well, by the time I call her, the plan's already shifted. They think they're going to have to deliver the baby that night, 6 months into it, 3 months early.
Wow.
She was at 27 weeks. And,
Barely viable at that time.
Barely viable. Exactly. And here I am in Louisiana, and so at that point I just told her, okay, I'm just going to pack a few things tonight and I'll be on the first flight in the morning. And ultimately that's what happened. So fortunately, what happens if you're familiar with, that premature of a baby, they give them steroid shots.
Right.
And that's really just to try and boost
their lungs.
The lungs, the brain, that kind of thing, as much as they can before they take the baby out. And so they actually bought us 48 hours. So I did get back in time for, the delivery and all that. But then we gave birth to Liam, and so here she is. It's 27 weeks. He was 1 pound, 14 ounces.
Wow, that's crazy.
And, so he and I are the ones who go into the NICU unit, which that's the reason why they moved us. We were moved to a specialized regional NICU unit that was prepared to handle that kind of situation. Christine, that's when those questions started.
Yeah.
That was the first time where I'm like, excuse me, what the heck? You've got to be kidding me. Why? I thought we were doing everything right. I thought that we would be protected from stuff like this, So yeah, those questions definitely have come at different points of our life. And that's really the first, what I would just call traumatic experience where it happened. Because he was in the hospital for 2.5 months. And especially early on, the way they're hooked up, and there's these bells that go off called Brady, when they have what's called a Brady episode, which is basically when their lungs and their brain are not fully connected yet. And so the baby just doesn't remember to breathe. So they stop breathing. And so it's very scary, and so that 2.5 months was terrifying. And there was many moments where you gotta be kidding me.
And so when you're living in that space of constant worry, and I mean, at some point when you have a baby in the NICU and these episodes are happening, I mean, you have to live every day hoping that they're going to make it through and living with the sobering reality that there's a possibility that you might be coming home with empty arms. So when you're in that space, constantly toggling between this fear that's very real and, wanting to hope, but not really having joy in the situation. And then you find yourself on the other side of it, because we know the story is Liam did make it through, correct?
Right. That's exactly right.
So what is life like after that? Because it feels like when you're in that space for several months, that becomes your new normal, and that becomes your coping mechanism of emotions, where it's you live in fear and it becomes, I wouldn't say a security blanket, but a familiar friend. and the joy isn't as close, how do you go on living your life to where you actually get rid of that constant fear and are able to start embracing joy again?
Yeah. Well, for us, it was really during that process, it was both. It wasn't an either or for us during that particular, especially those first 2.5 months. We had moments. You got to remember, Gabriel and Joel are 8 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something that I believe is true, especially when you're talking about, a healthy family unit, that when you've got to go through something traumatic together, I do think, I'm not going to say it's easy, but I am going to say it's easier to try and find ways to hang on to hope and to have joy, because we need to keep their hope alive too. What I didn't mention is this was also during the H1N1 virus.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the entire 2.5 months, Amárillys and I were the only two people that were allowed to visit Liam at all. So his brothers didn't even get to see him until the day he was released, nor did any grandparent or aunt and uncle or anybody. So there were definitely times, no question, to your point, that we fought fear, that we fought at times a feeling of hopelessness, like are we really going to make it through this? With him, there's no question. But we also had each other, and we also we had our prayer life, which and for your listeners, I'm not trying to give anybody a religious answer. This was just truthfully how we function. Prayer did give us hope and did encourage our faith. And then we had a lot of people that we knew were praying for us. And so I will say, for me, especially, my life as a believer specifically, it was during that season that it was the first time that I felt like I had actually felt physically and emotionally the tangible evidence of people praying for you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people, they're even in the church, they'll say, oh yeah, I'll pray for you, and you don't even know if they do. You don't even know what that means. And you don't necessarily sense anything either, right? But during that season, we really felt carried at times with other people's prayers. And that's the only way I can explain it,
Right.
And so ultimately, when we came out of that, you come home with a baby. I know one of the shows that I listened to of your guys, you had a lady on. I apologize, I can't remember.
Right. She was the newborn healthcare nurse. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but so I can relate to, our side of that. And so when you come home, it's not like it's over, right? It's exciting for sure, but it's not like you're out of the woods yet. And so we had, again, some scary moments for a while, for, a month or two, but eventually we found our rhythm as a family and we pushed through it. Now, your commentary on what it may have felt like and the battle between fear and joy and all that kind of thing, obviously would get tested in a far more challenging way years later.
Mm-hmm. So let's go there, Clint. So you bring home Liam, and your family starts to gel. You have your three boys together. And you'd mentioned that before that Gabriel was 8, and then Joel was 5, and then you bring home Liam, and you have your 3 boys, and now you're starting to live that quote unquote happily ever after with,
That's right.
with your kids. And then you get knocked down less than 10 years later by some really difficult circumstances. Can you take us there to what happened? And as much as you're willing, just share a little bit about what your family went through about 7, 8, 9 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the way you framed that. I think that was, well said. We did feel like once we got past that situation with Liam, that life was good, right? I mean, we were happy with what we were doing for a living. We were growing in that. We were given, greater responsibility. We had greater influence, all those markers of things that, show that your life is growing in the direction you want it to. And we had one blip on the radar about 5 years later where Amárillys had a spiral fracture of her femur wakeboarding one day. And the
But
boys were
even
still pretty little.
that, I mean, she was
Yeah.
wakeboarding. So
She
it
was
was like,
wakeboarding.
it was fun.
Well, it was fun, but this was in a remote lake.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, her leg was about 5 times the size it should be in
Wow.
about 30 seconds. And we had to, it took us almost ultimately what ended up being about 4 hours to get her to a hospital in Western Washington with the threat of her bleeding out.
Wow.
Because it was a spiral fracture of her femur. So, and that's not going to compare to where we're going, but I want to interject that a little bit because, we had 5.5 months after she had the surgery and was recovering where she couldn't even put her foot on the ground. So she couldn't drive. She couldn't help around the house. She couldn't do anything. So as a family, again, with the boys, they had to do some things that they didn't have to do before. They had to make some of their own food. They had to, clean up the house in certain ways.
Do their own laundry for once.
Yeah. So there were some things less serious, if I could say it that way, that again, just continually kind of helped us grow as a family that I know ultimately would help us. But what ended up being clearly the most difficult thing that we have ever faced and hopefully we'll ever have to face was our oldest boy, Gabriel. At about 8, he he went up in a little airplane with his uncle Danny, and that was it. I mean, he became an aviation junkie on the spot. That was it. He knew he wanted to fly. And so, being 8, we had plenty of time for that dream to turn in another direction,
Yeah, usually it happens. They want.
Totally.
I want to be an astronaut, and next thing you know, they grow up working at Walmart. But
I wanted to be a fire truck when I was 5, not a fireman, a fire truck. So this could go in any direction, right?
Transformers. We can still make it happen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So at 8, we're not thinking that much about it. But by the time he was 14 years old, he still absolutely wanted to become a pilot. And in short, we had moved back to McKinney, Texas, where I told you I live now. We had lived here before. And so we were back here in McKinney, and our school system here, he had just started high school, has a 4-year aviation program.
That's amazing.
As part of the track. Yeah, there's only a couple of places still in the country, I think, that have that particular, option. So he was able to start that. And then he joined a club. It was called, or is called Tango 31 Aero Club, which is at a little municipal airport about 7 minutes from our house. And this club was put together by a guy that he's kind of a legend in the aviation industry, salty old pilot, great guy, but he started a club for teenagers for the sole purpose of he had to work so hard for everything. He was given nothing, had a pretty tough upbringing, and he just wanted to be able to provide an opportunity for kids that were interested in aviation to have a way, because it's a very expensive hobby.
Yeah, I would think so. It sounds like a rich man sport, really, like that, and yachting, I guess, too. If you're gonna have a yacht club,
yeah, that's probably that may be next level there. Yeah, but you're exactly right. And at this point, we're pastors still, so we're not exactly raking in a 7-figure income, right? And so there was no way that we could afford to send him through flight school, but he joined this club. And so to fast forward, by the time he was 16, what Kevin Lacey is the name of the gentleman who started this club, and he provided planes.
Wow.
And he had relationships with instructors that donated their time. Literally all the kids had to pay was, this is going to make you laugh or you're shocked, one or the other. $50 a year to be a part of this club.
Wow.
Was that just for the paperwork to sign the ink?
I think that's a great question, Chris. I think it's just because he wanted them to have to pay something,
right?
Because it was nothing. But even the fuel for when they started flying, we got it wholesale. So all these doors, guys, just started opening left and right. And we really believed this is favor. As people of faith, we're like, this is favor. This is the favor of God. And so 16 years old, he gets in a plane and he solos before he even has his driver's license.
That's amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Just incredible experiences. And so back to what you had said earlier, Christine, man, at this stage, we're like, our lives are really going great. Look at what's happening. Even with Gabriel, he's got a dream to be a pilot, something we could never afford, or at least, no, I shouldn't say never, but at this stage in life, could not afford for him to be able to do. And yet look at this. And he actually got his pilot's license at 17, which is the youngest you can be to get your actual pilot's license certificate.
That's amazing. So before we go further, Clint, I have to pause the story and I have to ask you. So you're looking around, your kid is thriving. He's, surpassing these dreams that he held for himself. And like you're saying, everything's going great in your life. Did you have this nagging feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop? Or were you just embracing, like fully living into this idea that this is the way that life's going to be. And it's just, this is all of the good that God has for me. And we're not going to struggle. Cause I think that's an important mindset to be able to get into, is whether or not you did have in the back of your head, okay, something could happen. Or if you were completely, for lack of better terms, Pollyanna.
Yeah, no, that's a tremendous question. I'm glad you asked that. At that stage and where we're at in life, I can sincerely say that, and when I say we weren't looking for the shoe to drop, it wasn't like this prevailing thought. Now, to say as a parent, did we ever think of something that could go wrong with our kids? Absolutely. Every parent does, right? So it wasn't that we never thought of anything, but it wasn't really anything that we we're looking over our shoulder or anything like that, thinking, okay, this is going too good. Surely something bad's going to happen. It wasn't like that. And even with, in terms of fear of him flying, I've said this many times and I still believe it's true after 4 years, I had more fear with him getting in a car. Mm-hmm. And part of that logic was just simply when Gabriel was flying, he was so locked in, and he was very well trained, I should mention. So locked in. I mean, everything was about every little detail and checking everything on the aircraft before you got in. And, even if he had a passenger, this is not the time to talk to me. Just be quiet. I got to deal with stuff. He was very focused. Now, put him in a car, and he's 17 again. He's got the phone in one hand. He's got the music blaring. He's going 103 on our freeway here where you can go 75. It was just a different thing. And so at that point, no, it really seemed like, gosh, this really is Pollyanna, for lack of a better way to say it myself. It's just, things are just awesome, and then he got the license and started just putting in the hours, which is what every pilot does, not age-wise, just new pilot. Anytime they get their certificate, whether they're 17 or 70, you want to fly as many hours as you can. And he wanted to go commercial, so you need to get to 1,500 as soon as you can to be able to take that next step. So that's what he was doing. So life was just ordinary. Aviation and him flying was just a normal part of our life.
So like most kids go out for baseball practice, and your son's out, at the municipal airport flying solo, literally just, zooming around and getting his hours in. And, hey, Dad, I'm home. Oh, hey, son, how was it? We're at 20,000 feet today. That's not a normal conversation.
No, that's exactly right, though. Yeah.
Did he fly anywhere for just up and back to the same location? Did he fly to distances? I'm taking a trip to this location or that location.
Oh yeah, no, he's done cross country. He had flown to Wisconsin from where we are on 2 different occasions over the course of 2 years, because the club would go to something called Oshkosh. It's an air show in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's the biggest of its kind in the world. So he had flown there. He had flown several hours south, several hours north. The trip that we're going to get to eventually, he had made on a few different occasions because he had, I don't know, probably 20 friends that he graduated with that attended the University of Arkansas, which is where he was the day of the accident. So yeah, he did cross country, and that's part of the training. Chris, that's a great question, because part of the training is you have to start flying at night. You have to do cross country. There's certain markers. It's not just the hours. There's certain markers that you have to achieve to get that commercial license. So he was well on his way, living his dream. And then on September 23rd of 2019, it was just an ordinary day. Exactly what you said a minute ago, Christine. Literally the last words I ever heard or him walking out the door, the garage, saying, "Hey, Dad, I'll see you later." And so it's a normal day, and he goes, and it was about 4:00. He wasn't flying yet. They go, and there's a lot of pre-check and stuff. And about 8 p.m., we end up getting a call from Kevin, his mentor, who tracks all the kids who did fly. He tracks them on the iPad. And all we knew is that he had disappeared off the radar. And so, guys, we could spend a lot of time going through detail, but I think we can just get right to the point. It was a hellish night. Truly our worst nightmare. There was a lot of misinformation, a lot of confusion. We were being told one thing from the search and rescue, the sheriff's department that was in charge of that up in Arkansas. And then yet the news was covering the story too. And they were leaking information that the sheriff's department swore nobody should even have, including even at one point that there was a single fatality that they wouldn't confirm. And ultimately, about 3:30 in the morning, we got the final word that Gabriel had indeed. And what ultimately had happened, we'd find out. It took almost 2 years to get the NTSB report, because that's how it works, that he had suffered from spatial disorientation, which a lot of your listeners, of course, no reason for them to know what that is, but almost all of us are familiar with the Kobe Bryant crash.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was in a multi-million-dollar aircraft with a guy who had over 50,000 hours. And that's what happened to them. Spatial disorientation he had an unexpected weather system come through a mountain range about 20 minutes out of his return trip from Fayetteville, and he lost his horizon and likely thought he was flying up, and he was flying down, and he flew into a mountainside and lost his life.
Wow.
Oh gosh, it's so tragic. We both feel for your loss, and it's that was not that long ago. If you think about it, a couple of years ago.
No, it's not.
So you're facing this horrific moment, and I don't want to dig into the immediate aftermath, but what comes to my mind is this happens in your life, and then you go through the holidays, your first holiday without your son. And then, quite honestly, what happens is a few months later, our whole world shuts down, and now your whole family is, I'm assuming this isn't in your bio, but now you're all in space together.
Right.
The world has shut down. And when grief comes, we all know it comes in waves and in unexpected ways. And you can tend to keep yourself busy to a certain extent to not have to deal with it. But now your whole family is together and it's quiet and you can't go anywhere. Can you talk to us about what that was like for your family now processing through this extraordinary loss and being faced every day with the fifth member of your family not being there with you?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question, because I think our experience, even though it is horrific, if you're going to write a story, right? But for us as a family, I actually think being locked in ended up being to our advantage ultimately, which may sound a little counterintuitive. But when if you don't mind, I need to back up just a tiny bit for that to make sense. The day after the accident, Joel, my middle son, was a freshman in high school when this happened. And, his thing was football. So Gabriel was flying, Joel was football, Liam, it's martial arts. And we had to make a decision of whether or not he was going to go back to school that week, because this was a Tuesday morning. And as a freshman, they play on Wednesdays. There was a homecoming game the next day. And so I just asked Joel, we allowed, this is really important, guys. This is why I'm bringing it up for anybody that's maybe going through this now or been through it or may someday, God forbid. But we allowed our boys to be a part of the decision on how we were going to function and at what pace. Mm-hmm. We didn't just tell them what they were going to do. And so with Joel, we gave him the option, like, look, bud, you don't have to go to school at least the rest of this week. We can get all your work. You don't need to feel any pressure whatsoever. But if you want to go, we want to allow you to be able to make that decision. So take your time. And he didn't even hesitate. He said, no, I'm going to school. I'm going to school today. because I am playing tomorrow and I'm playing for my brother.
Mm.
And so, I'll admit that, there was certainly some trepidation with that, with him only being 14. So, we did some things. I don't need to get into, granular detail here, but I went with him. We met with staff and a grief counselor and all that stuff. We didn't just, send him off and not put some things in place in case he did have a hard time. But he made that decision to go. And the next day he ended up playing in that game, and it ended up being, truly it's movie worthy. He was a running back. He could play.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first play, there was about 100 people extra that had showed up. Freshman games don't get much attention. I don't know if you got any kids or you've been around that, but we're not talking, this is not.
It's not varsity.
It's not varsity. And even at a 6A school, which is where we are in Texas, not many people, but there was twice the crowd because there was over 100 people that knew he had dedicated the game. And so they all showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And so first play, he literally takes a pitch to the right. Looks like there's no way he's going to turn the corner because the team has an angle on him, and he breaks it and scores on a 40-yard touchdown.
Wow.
Nice.
Ends up having an incredible game. And I know this sounds weird to some people the day after, Gabriel passed away, but after that, when we were talking outside the locker room, it was just one of those moments where it was an exercise in we're in a lot of pain, but we have to live.
Mm-hmm.
And we had made a decision on the couch actually that Tuesday morning that we were in agreement as a family that the only way we could honor Gabriel was by living our lives the way he did, which is ultimately where this phrase "big, bold, brave" came from, which is the title of my book and my company. But those were things that took place. And so then when COVID hit 3 months later, what happened with us specifically was, like most people, the 30 days to, I can't remember how they said it now, 30 days to stop the spread or whatever it was.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. We were all like, okay, fine, let's do that. And so we did that. And then when the thing began to be prolonged, and guys, I'm not going to get political on this.
Sure.
This is not a political statement. I'm just answering your question, honestly. Once we got past that 30 days, and then it seemed like just more and more fear just began, whatever side you're on it, whether things were being done the right way or the wrong way, it didn't matter. There was fear everywhere. And we'd already suffered the greatest blow you're ever going to give us. We refused to be in fear.
Mm.
And so we had almost nothing in the backyard prior to that. So we ended up getting some furniture out back, and we got a fire pit, and we'd go out there at night and we'd do s'mores and, hang out. And my wife and I drink a glass of wine or whatever. And, we played games, we hung out. When there did come a point where we could do any kind of traveling at all, fortunately we have family in Florida, and Florida was one of the places you could go. We go on trips. We tried to make things as normal as we possibly could, even though clearly nothing was normal, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that was really the way we fought it as a family. And so, we grieved together, we loved together, we cried together, we had, some great memories that we built during that time. It was all of it. And it really gelled us even more so as a family. And, nothing's perfect. And there's even many more things that I could tell you, in our conversation. 2 years later, we almost lost Joel to a horrific car accident, literally shouldn't have walked away from it, should be dead. And he survived it. There's been other hits, but it was during that lockdown season that I think I think you were the one who said earlier, we gelled as a family. I think that solidified so rock solid that we even had this discussion not too long ago, because my middle son, Joel, is now attending Oklahoma State University. He's a freshman. We just dropped him off about 2 weeks ago. That we feel like as a family, there's just really nothing you could throw at us that would tear us apart. Now, we're not inviting it. We don't want to experience anything beyond what we already have. I don't mean that at all. I don't mean that in a flippant way.
But you think maybe you're better prepared for it today than you were?
Without question. Yeah, without question.
And I think that that's a really big point that you bring up, and you'd alluded to your book but this big, bold, brave lifestyle,
Right.
it's something that it sounds like it's not just let's write this down and put it in a book and pretend like it's what happened, but that you and your family have had to make some intentional decisions of how
Right.
to not make fear your closest friend and ally, for a lack of better
Yeah.
terms,
No,
but
that's a
to
great way to say it.
really figure out how to face it. And so for our listeners out there that are going through what could be an insurmountable obstacle, whether it's a family tragedy, a financial loss, yet another setback, a broken relationship. I mean, fill in the blank of the hurts and disappointments that people are navigating through. What would you tell them that you've learned through this journey that may be a lesson from your book as well?
There's always hope. There's always hope. And, the reason why I wrote the book when I did, guys, because I didn't start writing it until about 2 years after Gabriel passed away. So we were kind of on the tail end of the extreme part of COVID. The world was starting to return at least to the new, semblance of normal, whatever that is, right? So that's actually when I started to write the book, because I didn't write the book as a grieving book. Although there is some, there's a lot in there. It's very raw. It's very real. There's a lot in there that's very helpful to people that maybe have suffered some sort of loss. But, during COVID, so many people lost, right? Whether it was losing a family member, or they lost careers or businesses that they built, and, maybe they had just gotten started, or maybe they'd had it for 30 years. I mean, there was just so much loss and so much fear that's when I felt like I can write something that's not just going to help people overcome the gut punches of the losses that we all face at some point in life, but to do it in such a way that you don't. And I can't remember exactly how he said it. I wish I could, because he just killed it in my mind on the whole fear thing. But just I mentioned eating fear for breakfast. It's kind of a cutesy phrase, but how to eat fear. Not let fear eat you, and to have hope, and to continue to have dreams no matter what life is throwing at you. And to me, especially with the book itself, I didn't write about stuff that we don't live. There's a lot. I'm in the personal development space now. There's an enormous amount of people out there who are saying all kinds of stuff on social media, and they've never lived a lick of it. All they're doing is repeating stuff they've heard from someone else.
Right.
We've lived it. And not perfectly, by the way. I'll make that very clear. We're not perfect at all. We've had battles and had to recalibrate and start over, and we messed this up, and we're like anybody.
Yeah, but sometimes experience is like the best life coach, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question. So that's why I wrote it. When I did, was to help people with that. And so ultimately, to your question, I sincerely believe, not just because I have this faith, although that's a very real thing for me, but because we've lived through it and we have suffered gut punches, and yet we have learned that there are things that you can do in life. There are not systems or exact formulas, but there are principles that you can live by, that if you'll make them your daily, like, this is how we live life, then you can overcome any gut punch, and you can have joy even when you're going through, really tough times and maybe deep pain for other reasons. You can experience all those things, and you can continue to chase your dreams. And I think for us, what's the most important out of all of it is that we do it in such a way that it helps other people too. It's not just about, us feeling successful in our lives, but it's about helping other people do the same.
So you've written this fantastic book, Big, Bold, Brave, How to Live Courageously in a Risky World. For our listeners that are going to all run out and get a copy of it after listening to this podcast episode, what would be your first piece of advice for them as they crack open that book and get ready to start reading page number 1?
Yeah. Oof, man, that's a great question. You know what? I think I told you earlier, probably 70 interviews since December. No one has asked me that question, Christine.
You're
I
welcome.
love that.
That's why she's the best.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great question. I think the first thing I would say is, and I'm just going to reiterate one thing I said a second ago, is the posture. You already know the hardest part of my story that I share in that book. Do not go in this with the attitude that you're reading a book about grieving. Now, it's going to have some triggers for people that have lost. It's just reality. I'm really raw and I'm really real with our experience. And I've gotten enough endorsements now to where I don't have to feel like this is, any kind of boast, but I'm a pretty good writer too. And so the story is going to draw you into some of those for sure, but don't posture yourself like you need to read this as a grieving book. It's a book about life. So my second part of the answer would be this is I had a dear friend, and I'm so grateful for this. I thought I was done writing the book, and I sent it to one more person. She's one of my endorsements. And this is someone who's written 4 books herself and has had some commercial success and some other things. And she said, there's one problem. I'm like, oh no, what's the problem? And she's like, I had not put at the end of every chapter something to help people digest it and maybe even, take some sort of a tangible step. Now I had in some, but it was accidental. It wasn't intentional. So she says, I think you need to do that. So I literally put the book down, you guys, because I thought I was done. And I'm like, I can't do this today. So I just sat for like 2-3 months. And then I came back. And after every chapter, and I call them reflections. In some cases, it's just some very simple questions. In some cases, it's some exercises. Each chapter warranted something a little bit different. But there are things in it that if you will engage in it, it's going to help you customize what this book can do for you. Because it's not, at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's not about my story. My story doesn't matter. But there's a lot of things in the stories that I share, which I'll give you one little teaser. I also included 4 stories and 4 other freaking incredible human beings in this that I consider to be people that live big, bold, and brave. I don't even want to give anything else away because their stories are so radical. But there's so much in it that you can take it and customize it to who you want to become, what you want to experience in life, or what you may need to get over. And I think if you do those 2 things, it's going to be a help.
That's fantastic.
Well, Clint, we really appreciate you taking us on this journey through your life experience and also sharing with our listeners this book that I think can help so many people navigate some of the complexities they're going through in life. Where can our listeners find out more about it? And if they've been inspired and they want to learn more about you and have you come and speak to a group that they host, where can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. First, for the book, pretty simple. They can get it anywhere books are sold. I'm currently out of stock myself, so that's going to lead me to the best way to connect with me is my website, which I know you guys are going to put everything in the show notes. So if you go to my website, you can check into anything about my speaking engagements, because I also I want to be very clear on this because it may not be evident. I also do corporate speaking as well. I actually was super excited. A few days ago, I can't say who, but I just landed a talk with about 175 leaders in a global company that you would know. And
that's amazing.
I'm super excited about it. I can't put that out there yet.
That's fantastic, man.
But it's really, again, just to help people with basic principles. It doesn't matter if you're a person of faith or not, but I do all that. So you can go to the website. This is the funny thing that happened in building the website that I didn't expect. For myself, I put a story about Gabriel. I put some videos of him flying and some other just really personal stuff that was totally just for me. And I found that actually people have enjoyed doing that as well. So there's some of that on there so you can get to know us a little bit better. But the website, far and away the easiest. And I'm actually getting ready to reorder some books. So either way, whether you get them through me or through Amazon, whoever, you'll be able to pick up a book.
Fantastic, Clint. And are there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
You know what? I would like to leave them with 3 tenets of what I believe about every human being. You'll find it on my website, but I think this is so true. And for those of you who are listening right now, I want you to hear my voice right now. I want you to really hone in on what I'm about to say, because there's chances are when, we don't even know when you're going to listen to this, that you may not be feeling this way. But these 3 things are true. I believe every human being was created to be courageous. I believe it's already in you. Now, you may need some help tapping into it. You may need some friends and family and different people to help you recognize it, but it's there. The second thing is I believe that we were all created with a creative genius. Now, I actually have a talk, you guys, and a whole thing on that I can actually use science to prove it. And there's a NASA study that would blow your mind that's super cool that I've used to help prove that point. But every one of you listening to me right now, you have a creative genius. It's in you. And it may be so easy for you that you don't even think it's a thing, but it's in there. You have a creative genius that only you have that can bring great value to the world, but you've got to tap into it and you've got to do things to hone that. And then the third thing is I believe we were all created to be compassionate. And I think you guys would agree with me. The world needs a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And it's in you. It's in you. You have it. You can develop it. You can become more compassionate and just make a difference in the world around you.
Absolutely. And I think that that's what I would like to leave our listeners with. And the thing that I've been pulling away from your story is, despite the hardship and the heartache and the challenges that you and your family have faced and overcome, what I hear emanating from you is not just this desire to help other people live their best life, but just being like a genuinely kind human being that just radiates through the microphone. And so I think that's a really important life lesson is you can still go through all of the hard things in life and still be a decent, compassionate human being that's committed to leaving this world a better place. And so, Clint, thank you for making our world a better place. And listeners, definitely check out the show notes from today's episode. I know that I have so greatly enjoyed this interview and just been really enthralled with your story. And Chris, any last words you'd like to leave?
Thanks, Clint. Thanks for sharing your incredible story.
Thank you, guys.
I'm sorry for all the downs you've had in your life, and you put such a positive spin on it on the backside of such tragedy, and we're very grateful for you for being here today.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you guys. And if I could just say one last thing to your listeners is I love what you guys are doing. You do such an amazing job. And I hope that people will continue to support you and just having these amazing conversations that just help so many people. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, Clint.
Are you in the middle of wedding planning and feeling overwhelmed? There's no need to fret, my friend. Christine Smith Designs is here to rescue you. Offering wedding planning, coordination, and wedding floral design services, let us help relieve your stress and make your wedding day dreams a reality. Visit us at christinesmithdesigns.com. That's KRISTINE smithdesigns.com and request a free consultation. You'll be so glad you did.
I really appreciated how Clint was just, so authentic with us. I really got a lot out of that conversation.
Yeah, he was a great guy. And I feel, he went through a lot of tragedy, especially with his son and flying and all the, downturns he's had in his life. I think most of us, if you think about it, almost every person has had some bit of downturn in their life, and they've had to figure out ways to overcome it, face it and, do their best.
Right. Figure out how to be resilient. And I loved when he talked specifically about that, like the resilience and the carrying through and how to move forward, especially after, navigating through the grief in the midst of the pandemic and figuring out how to bond together as a family and stay together. And, it reminded me a lot of just the amount of strength that people can have when they really commit to not letting something get them down. And, it's not to say that you don't have a right to struggle with depression and things like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like that really hard work of figuring out how to get out of the depths of despair. It takes so much energy, but once you emerge from it, you can learn so much from that journey. And I think it can help you to be a lot more empathetic with other people.
Yeah, I think so too. I totally agree. You are the doctor, and didn't you get a degree in that, by the way, in empathy?
No, what are you talking about?
Oh, I thought you did.
You're such a goofball.
Oh, well, my mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, I will make one a year, so it's my mistake. But anyways.
Whatever. Well, this has been a fantastic episode, Chris. And where, if our listeners wanted to find out more about us and our guest from this week, can they find out more about us?
Oh, you can go to our website, which is chrisandchristineshow.com. And all the information about our guest, Clint, and all this information will be in the show notes of this episode.
Absolutely. So definitely make sure to subscribe to our show. Leave us a great 5-star review if you loved this episode. Share it with a friend and check us out on our website. And we will be back with you next week.